Hi everyone, Dr. Luqman here, welcoming you back to our YouTube channel, and today we're going to be talking all about cats and Halloween. Candies, costumes, and creativity. The Halloween season definitely has it all for people who love this special holiday. But what about cats? And if you own a cat, is there something you should be mindful of, around Halloween? This is what we'll talk about in today's video. Now, Halloween is not a holiday that people generally associate with pets because it's all about humans dressing up. But in recent years, we've seen that pets have become part of this tradition as well. Now, where do cats fit into the mold as far as all of this is concerned? Interestingly enough, cats do have a very strong historical association with Halloween. Initially, cats were actually thought of the antithesis of witches, like they were the good things and witches were supposedly considered the bad things. But there came a time in the medieval ages where cats and witches were associated as the same thing, and black cats were often associated with bad luck. And they were also often eventually associated with witchcraft, and people tend to shun black cats, especially around Hallows Eve, which is what it was called back then. However, thankfully, times have changed, and rest assured that your cat is definitely not going to bring you any bad luck around Halloween. So that takes care of the historical component of our video today. Now, as a cat owner, you might be wondering if there are certain things you need to be mindful of when it comes to your pet and, the Halloween holidays. First things first, Halloween is probably best known for carving out pumpkins. Now, as we all know by now, or we should know by now, cats are, obligate carnivores. And although there are a few, plants / cereals / grains that cats can on occasion safely consume, they are nonetheless not really recommended for them. So therefore, if you are carving out a pumpkin and you have a lot of leftover pumpkin, it is a very good idea to not offer these to your cat. And in most likelihood, your cat might be curious about what's going on, but they likely would not want to eat the pumpkin, to a point where you have to worry about hiding the pumpkin from them. So pumpkins are usually not, something cats would go for. But if you do notice your cat showing an interest in pumpkins, you might want to keep an eye on them. Another thing to be very mindful about is when you're carving a pumpkin, you're usually using, butcher knives or bigger than average knives or excessively sharp knives to get that perfect smile or that perfect shape or that perfect frown, whatever, creative outlet you're looking for with regards to carving your pumpkin. And of course, sharp knives, sharp objects, or anything sharp on a tabletop is a recipe for disaster if your cat is showing an interest in what you're doing and decides to jump on the table. So just be very mindful about that as well. Next, let's talk about candy. Now, as we all know, candy is a really big part of Halloween. Trick-or-treaters all over the world love to go to your house, say trick or treat, and, they're expecting a treat from you. So, it is normal to expect there being more candy around this time of year. It might also be common to expect more candy in your house if your children go trick-or-treating and come back with, a haul of candy. Generally speaking, all candies are not recommended for cats to eat. And you should be particularly careful with chocolates because chocolates are toxic for cats. And the darker the chocolate, the more toxic it is for cats. But that's not an excuse to feed your cat like a milk chocolate or, a chocolate that is not as dark as a pure dark chocolate. Just leave chocolates away from cats. And on the same note, just leave candy away from cats as well. Even if a specific candy is not extremely toxic for your cat, you have to be very careful because a cat may actually choke on candies as well if they swallow them too quickly. So that is another thing that makes candies, risky. In addition to being unhealthy, they're also coming with a risk of being a choking hazard. So you definitely do not want to let your cat have candies. And on a related note, oftentimes people like to spruce up their candies by wrapping them, in colorful bows or strings or ties, something along those lines, which definitely, look amazing. They look pretty, but you have to be very careful because these kind of strings, ropes, or long pieces of thread are very commonly found in cats. They are usually the most commonly ingested foreign body in cats. They're also known as linear foreign bodies, and to extract these, cats usually end up needing surgery. So if your kids are unwrapping candy or if you are wrapping candy at a station, it is perfectly fine to want your candy to look, spectacular and beautiful, but just be very mindful about where your cat is. Now, on the topic of candy and trick-or-treaters, please be very mindful that it is very normal on Halloween for your door to open and close multiple times because there are trick-or-treaters coming to your house, and at the same time, you might be leaving out to go trick-or-treating yourself. And an open door with an ambitious cat is, very likely going to lead to a cat that escapes. Now, cats that are more likely to escape are actually those that are intact. So by intact, we mean that they are not yet spayed or castrated or neutered at the vet. Now, if there's a female cat and she is intact and she's in heat, she will have an urge to often escape to go find a mate. So every time the door opens and closes, she has an opportunity to run away and go find, a tomcat. Likewise, if tomcats are in an area and they can detect that there's a female nearby in heat, they will want to escape to go mate with that female. So if you have an intact male, you have to be very careful as well, because they too might look at, an open door as a perfect opportunity to make a run for it. Now, that's not to say that if your cat is, neutered, that they are completely fine and they're going to ignore the door. No, cats are naturally very inquisitive. They're very curious. And an open door sometimes just looks like an invitation for exploration. And, there's a very high chance that your cat might see an open door as an opportunity rather than, like stay indoors or something. They might say, oh, hey, look at that, an open door. How wonderful. Let me just, run away and have some fun. Of course, this is dangerous for cats for several reasons. Cats can get caught by traps that are set for other animals. Cats can sometimes inadvertently get hurt when they're outdoors because they're attacked by other cats or other predators. Cats may ingest poisons while they're outdoors, which we'll come to in a bit. And cats may obviously get lost and struggle to find their way back home, which is often very traumatic. In a worst case scenario, cats can often, unfortunately, end up in motor vehicle accidents when they're outdoors. And of course, this requires prompt veterinary care because it is considered an emergency. Therefore, it is best that while, on peak hours of trick-or-treating, you keep your cat indoors in their own room. But please be mindful that this should not be treated as punishment. So your cat should not be locked in a room where they have access to nothing at all, because that's not fair for your cat. So what you should do is you should place, water in their room so that they can drink whenever they want to. You should feed them probably before you put them in the room, or you can also feed them in the room if you want to, if it's, their dinner time or whatever. They should have toys in there. Their litter box should be in there, so they shouldn't be forced to hold it in while they're in that room. Your cat should also have access to a scratching board, perhaps, their favorite bed, perhaps, to rest in. And of course, they need access to your company as well. So periodically you might want to check in or have, a family member check in, play with your cat, have interactions with your cat. Make sure that it's not punishment because it's not their fault that, it just happens to be Halloween. Now, some people like to go above and beyond with their Halloween decorations, which is fine. It is, after all, a creative holiday. There's nothing wrong with being, creative and letting, your creativity come out during such a holiday. As explained by my wonderful ghost shirt, it's always fun, and different people have different ideas or perceptions of what they find creative. And some people like to go above and beyond with special effects in their houses or in their front yards. Now, this leads to a very interesting conundrum as far as your cats are concerned. The main concern is that most of these special effect items, as we'll discuss shortly, are likely not safe for your cat. So first, you have what we call theatrical blood or fake blood. Now, some people like to use this for special effects with perhaps, their decor or their costumes itself. These are usually made with a corn syrup base or another syrup as a base, and then they usually contain very unsafe ingredients inside them. Oftentimes, they do contain chemicals. They do contain food coloring that gives them the red color. They also usually contain dishwashing soap of some kind to kind of give it that kind of bubbly, sludgy kind of, blood-like appearance. So just to make it look as real as possible. And obviously, if your cat licks fake blood or theatrical blood or special effects blood, it is, something that is considered not safe for them to, ingest. So you should definitely keep your cat away from theatrical blood. This is why I mentioned you should be very careful about letting your cat out on Halloween, because they might go into someone's yard where these things are just there. Now, your cat would not know that fake blood is supposed to be fake blood, obviously. To your cat, they might smell, the syrup in there, and they might, just perhaps out of sheer curiosity, if anything else, take a few licks of it. And of course, it is not safe for their consumption. So you might end up with a very sick cat that needs veterinary attention. Another thing people like to do when they're being super creative is perhaps smoke machines. Now, smoke machines, once again, are considered usually safe for humans, but there are limits for humans as well. So you can't just be living in a cloud of smoke, obviously. So most people, temporarily press a button or something that ejects some smoke to kind of make their house look extra spooky, or, give their house a very nice effect for, guests that are coming over, etc. Again, nothing wrong with that, but most inhalants are not really friendly as far as a cat's respiratory system goes, because they are generally very sensitive towards aerosols. This is also why we usually advise against diffusing essential oils around cats, because cats lack a specific enzyme pathway in their liver to metabolize essential oils effectively. So essentially it just keeps accumulating in their bodies. Smoke is a similar conundrum. Cats are, obviously going to inhale smoke if it's near them. And even though it's fake smoke, so it's not usually carcinogenic for humans, it can still prove to be a health hazard for cats. Now, with regards to this, you have to be very careful if your cat is asthmatic, if your cat has a respiratory condition, and it can be any respiratory condition. So it could be something like your cat is recovering from a flu, or your cat, just had a flu and is fine now, but it's only been like around 1 week since the flu episode ended, and they're still not 100%. Or if your cat, is perhaps allergic to something like dust or anything. So, these kind of things do play a part and make them more sensitive. Kittens are especially sensitive to aerosols, so you have to be very careful if your cat is still, a juvenile kitten. As a general rule of thumb, though, there's no medical benefit, or there's no, thrill or joy for a cat to be exposed to smoke. So it's something you should, probably avoid as much as you can. So again, it's not to say that, these effects aren't cool. They are definitely cool. They're definitely a part of Halloween. We all love celebrating holidays, but we have to be a bit careful when our pets are involved. The same thing goes for jack-o'-lanterns. Now, jack-o'-lanterns look amazing in the night light because they, glow like an orange-red kind of color. They are usually filled with something that is able to, be on fire, like candles or something. There are artificial ones as well. Generally speaking, you want to be safe and not have your cat explore a jack-o'-lantern. If there is fire inside, this is obviously a huge risk for your pet cat. Now, coming back to enjoying the holidays with your pets, many people like to dress up their cats in costumes. And several people like to do it even when it's not Halloween, and that's fine. Now, should you dress your cat up? Now, there are some people who will say that that's ridiculous. You should not dress your cat up. Your cat's an animal. They don't like being covered, and they have their own point of view, which I guess is their own point of view. But generally speaking, if your cat is comfortable wearing clothes, then dressing them up should not be a major issue. You do have to make sure, though, that whatever costume you put on your cat does not have any loose ends, strings, tiny balls, like perhaps a little bell hanging on the side, or anything that your cat might, suddenly turn around, because they're very flexible and, break off and swallow, because that would, again, be a foreign body that's inside your cat. But if there's a general costume that's perhaps made for pets, made especially for cats, and your cat doesn't mind having clothes on, it's probably going to be perfectly safe for your cat to, take part in your festivities. In many ways, this is very similar to the first time your cat puts on an e-collar or an Elizabethan collar, also called a donut collar, or, the cone of shame. Usually the first time cats put these on, they're really uncomfortable and they're kind of confused and all over the place and they don't appreciate it. But over time, they get used to it, and then they don't seem to have, a reaction either way to putting on the collar. And clothes are often the same thing, or costumes are the same thing. If it's the first time, your cat might not appreciate it. But if it's something your cat is used to, then you can definitely have your cat, dress up for Halloween, provided that there aren't, suffering with any skin conditions at the moment. So for example, if they had a surgery and they have, for example, sutures somewhere, or if they have a really large wound that needs to be cleaned on a daily basis and, wrapped in bandages and stuff, you would actually probably not want to put them in a costume, but you could perhaps, get a little creative and extend the bandage if you want and make your cat like a mummy or something. And there are ways to like work around it depending on, the extent of your cat's ailment or injury. But generally speaking, you would want to put costumes on, intact skin with good fur and on healthy cats, basically. Now, this brings us to another interesting conundrum, which is animal dyes. So, black cats do have an association with Halloween. It is often, seen as a potentially negative association, but in, recent years, people have kind of turned this into more of like a cool factor or more of like, an interesting factor with regards to cats and Halloween. And some people do like to, apply animal dyes on their cats. Now, most veterinarians do not advise placing dyes on your pets, even if it's, a natural dye. Because please bear in mind that although it says made of natural ingredients, it doesn't mean it's safe. So natural does not mean safe when it comes to cats. Natural just means that the ingredients inside there are, probably not processed heavily, or probably, they don't have chemical additives in them or no excessive amount of preservatives in them. But there are natural preservatives that might be in there. There are natural colors that might be in there. And therefore, just because something is natural does not mean it is automatically safe. Now, in addition, another thing you have to be very mindful of when it comes to dyes is some jurisdictions actually make it illegal to dye your pets. So first things first, if you are considering this, please make sure that it's legal to do so. And my second advice would be to please seriously reconsider it, because it is really not beneficial for your cat to be, covered in dye. That's not to say that there are, perhaps some products out there that are marketed as safe for cats, or cat dyes, etc., animal dyes. These are usually temporary, and there's usually a guideline on, when they will wash off. They usually say around after 6 to 8 bath sessions, the dye will eventually come off. But generally speaking, these aren't very thoroughly researched as far as their long-term health implications. And cats, as we know, are very fastidious groomers. So what cats like to do, for most of their waking time is they're going to eat, they're going to play, and then usually they're going to groom themselves. They like to keep themselves very neat. So it usually starts at the face. So they're going to use their paw like a loofah, and they're going to probably lick it with their tongue, rub it all over their face, and then it slowly progresses to all over their body until they ideally get every single spot. So chances are, if your cat is dyed, they will eventually, lick it off and ingest some of the dye. And once they ingest it, there's always a health risk associated with ingesting something that an animal is not supposed to ingest. So generally speaking, we would advise against dyeing your animals. But costumes, like I've discussed before, are usually fine. A lot of people like to come over the dye conundrum by usually dyeing their animals just on the heads. So basically in areas where, they know that their cats cannot lick it off easily. But please bear in mind that if you have more than one cat, they are, very much able to lick each other's head if they want to. If your cat mingles with another cat or another pet that you have, for example, a dog, they can lick each other. And oftentimes when cats or dogs or cats are, have a companionship with other animals in the house, they do like to do what is called mutual grooming. So they will, groom each other. It's also sometimes referred to as allopreening or allo grooming, which is, grooming each other. So there's a chance that you might end up with a cat that licks, another cat's head and inadvertently ingests dye. So again, this remains a controversial topic, and it's something you should probably consider discussing with your veterinarian. And in most likelihood, if there is a safe dye available for use where you stay, your veterinarian would probably have the best advice for you. Your veterinarian would also probably know if it's legal to have your animal dyed where you stay. So if you're unsure, our advice would be don't go for it, because it's not really beneficial and it does have some risks, even in the best case scenario. But if you're still not convinced, you should just speak to your veterinarian to, have a definitive answer that can help you make your decisions. One more thing with cats and Halloween. Now, again, Halloween is a season that is associated with spookiness, and that's kind of the fun of it. A lot of people like to, play sounds that are really loud and spooky. So we have thunder, we have, haunted mansion sounds like ghostly sounds, etc. And please bear in mind that depending on your cat, these sounds might be very scary for some cats, and other cats might be okay with them, but still probably not appreciative of them. So you might have a cat that, as the season says, they will get spooked when they hear these sounds. So what you do want to be careful about is if you do know your cat's personality and they get very anxious around loud sounds, is to probably keep them away from these sounds. But if your cat still seems to have a very difficult time adjusting to constant loud noises, you should consider perhaps asking your vet for a sedative that is safe for your cat for the holidays. Now, depending on your cat's severity of anxiety, your vet can actually prescribe an appropriately dosed sedative. And, in some cases, you don't need really strong pharmaceutical intervention, but some cats do need, a little help to deal with their anxiety. And of course, if you do have an anxious pet around the holidays, for example, it's your first holiday with your cat, you're not sure how they're going to react to loud sounds and everything. If you do notice your cat is being very anxious, very frightful, or generally not acting like themselves. For example, they might be hiding under a bed. They might go hiding in a closet. They might start, looking like around frantically, trying to escape basically in almost like a fearful manner. Try to sit down with your cat calmly and try to use a very nice, calm, soothing voice. Try to offer them some treats to distract them. Try to pet them if they like to be cuddled. Please be mindful that a cat that is panicked may sometimes take their aggression out on you. So they get so scared that the minute, they see you, they have what is called redirected aggression, and they will suddenly attack you out of a freak out moment. Now, this is similar to if you are scared in a haunted house and, if your friend just goes like, hey, what's up? And you suddenly go like, ah, and you just smack them, it's like a very instinctive sort of you don't really think, you just lash out because you are scared. And I guess when someone approaches you, you kind of take everything out on them because they are, a source for you to disperse your frightfulness or any kind of anxious feelings that you have in moments where you're terrified. This can happen with cats as well. So although it is advisable to, spend time with your cat, please be mindful that your cat may, sometimes be so scared to the point where they suddenly turn and, they end up attacking you. So it might be a good idea to, put on some clothes that are relatively thick before you go to interact with your cat, because you definitely do not want to get scratched or bitten. So perhaps, a pair of long pants, perhaps a pair of really thick jeans, a full sleeve shirt, something like that, just to be on the safe side. Perhaps a hoodie or something like that to cover up. And just assess your cat carefully before you approach them. There are diffusers available on the market. These are calming pheromones for cats. Depending on your cat, these may or may not work. There's no one size fits all when it comes to these kind of products. It is not correct to say that they don't work because they have been proven to clinically work in some circumstances, but it is also incorrect to guarantee that they will be very effective in helping calm your cat down, because some cats just need, a little bit of extra assistance from the veterinarian. So if you do figure out that this is the first time that your cat has an anxiety problem, then definitely, a visit to your veterinarian would be in order. And we would recommend doing this the following day if possible, because in the moment when your cat is really freaked out, your cat might be very impossible for you to calmly restrain them. In a worst case scenario, you can actually ask if your vet does house visits so that, you don't have to go through the trouble of having to capture an already, freaked out animal. But most cats are actually relatively fine once the traumatic event passes. You still have to be a bit careful as you approach them. And finally, we do realize that Halloween is upon us. This means that for most people in the Northern Hemisphere, the winter months are coming, and cats in winter have special considerations, which we will definitely be talking about in our future videos. For those in the Southern Hemisphere, This definitely means that summer is on its way, and once again, cats do have, special needs during the summer months as well, which we'll be probably talking about in a future video. But just be very careful when weathers are changing, because cats are more likely to shed, and cats may have seasonal changes as well, which sometimes correlate to their behavior. So for intact females, they usually will stop cycling as the weather gets cold. But at the same time, as it gets warmer, an intact female will be cycling once more, and she'll be constantly coming into heat, provided she has access to enough sunlight hours per day as one of the requirements. Now, with that, this is me, Dr. Luqman, signing off for this video. As always, guys, if you enjoyed this video, please do leave us a like, a comment, and of course, please do subscribe to our channel. We have a lot of interesting content coming for you over this holiday season, so we do hope that you stick around and keep following us every Monday. Myself and Isabel are going to be working on bringing you some very interesting cat topics and, of course, very interesting videos in the near future. Once again, Dr. Luqman signing off. Bye, guys.